Hello and welcome to Life Diary. My name is Mikhailu, and today we have a powerful, realistic story about love, age, and emotional attachment. If you enjoy real-life stories that feel honest and close to home, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment below. He was just a courier trying to survive another exhausting day when one wrong delivery changed everything. A single sentence at the door pulled him into a connection that felt real, warm, and deeply human. What began as comfort slowly turned into something he never expected, and by the end, he learned the difference between being loved and simply being desired. Hello, my name is John. I'm 28 years old, and I work as a delivery courier. I live in a small rented apartment on the edge of the city, nothing fancy. Just a bed, a table, and a place to charge my phone between shifts. I've been doing this job for almost 3 years now. Long hours, short breaks, always moving. It pays the bills, but it's not a dream. It's just life. That day started badly, like many others. My phone holder in the van broke again, and I had to keep checking the screen while parked, which made me late. The dispatcher was already sending short messages. Hurry up, clients are waiting. I skipped breakfast, grabbed cheap coffee at a gas station, and told myself I'd eat later. By the afternoon, I was tired and irritated. The last delivery on my list was in an older apartment building. Narrow stairs, weak lighting, numbers on the doors barely visible. I checked the address quickly, climbed to the third floor, and knocked. The door opened almost immediately. A woman stood there, barefoot, wearing a loose sweater. She looked confident, calm, not surprised to see me at all. She was older than me, clearly, but carried herself like someone who knew exactly who she was. I read out the name on the package. She smiled slightly and shook her head. Wrong apartment, she said. You're one door off. I apologized right away, feeling stupid. I turned to leave, but she laughed softly. Don't worry, she said. It happens. Then she looked at me for a second longer and added, almost casually, I like young couriers. I didn't know how to react. I smiled out of reflex, nodded, and said something awkward like, have a nice day. She handed me a small bottle of water from behind the door and told me I looked exhausted. Take it. You look like you need it more than I do. I thanked her and walked to the next door, my face warm, my thoughts messy. I delivered the package, went back down the stairs, and sat in my van for a moment longer than usual. It was a strange encounter. Not dramatic. Not romantic. Just unexpected. I told myself it meant nothing. But the rest of the day, her voice stayed with me. Not the words exactly, but the tone. Calm. Familiar. Like she'd said it 100 times before and didn't think much of it. A week later, I was back in the same building. Different package. Same floor. I noticed the door before I even realized it. When she opened it again, she smiled as if she had been expecting me. John, right? She said. I was surprised she remembered. I nodded. She introduced herself as May. She was 43. She said it openly, without hesitation, as if age was just a number she carried lightly. I told her my age. She raised her eyebrows and laughed. Figures. She offered me water again. This time, I accepted without hesitation. We talked for maybe 2 minutes. About the building. About deliveries. About how noisy the city had become. Nothing important. Nothing heavy. But when I left, I felt lighter. Over the next weeks, our paths crossed again. Not planned. Just coincidence. Same routes, same area. Each time, a few words longer. A bit more relaxed. One evening, after a long shift, she invited me in for tea. Just tea, she said. I hesitated, then agreed. Her apartment was simple but warm. Photos on the walls from another life. Dance shoes by the door. She told me she used to be a dancer. Stage, lights, applause. Now she taught occasionally, mostly stayed home. The city had changed, she said. People left. People aged. I listened. I didn't interrupt. That night, nothing happened. No touch, no promises. Just conversation and silence that didn't feel uncomfortable. When I left, it was already dark outside. I walked to my van slowly, thinking about how easy it had felt. How natural. I told myself again not to read too much into it. But I did. Because for the first time in a long while, someone had looked at me not as a courier, not as a tired guy in a uniform, but as a person worth noticing. And I didn't yet understand that for her, it was just another door opening. The next time I came to that building, it wasn't planned. At least not on paper. The route just happened to run through the same block again. Different package, different client, same tired feeling in my legs. I told myself I didn't care which floor it was, but when I checked the address and saw the third floor again, my chest tightened slightly. I walked up the stairs slower than usual. Half of me expected nothing. The other half was already listening for a familiar voice. I knocked on the door I was supposed to knock on. While I waited, the neighboring door opened first. May leaned against the doorframe, holding a mug in both hands. She looked at me like this was the most normal thing in the world. "You're back," she said. "Looks like it," I answered. She noticed the uniform, the tired shoulders, the way I shifted my weight from one foot to the other. "Long day?" she asked. I nodded. She stepped aside and pointed at the mug. "Tea. Fresh. You can have a sip if you want." I hesitated for a second. It was still working hours. Still a job. Still rules. But the hallway was quiet. The client I was waiting for wasn't opening the door, and I felt strangely safe standing there. I took a small sip. It tasted simple. Nothing special. "Thanks," I said. She smiled, the same calm smile. No rush, no pressure. The door behind me finally opened. I delivered the package, did my job, and left. But this time, when I went back down the stairs, I felt like I had left something unfinished upstairs. After that, the encounters became small and regular, the way real life does it. No big moments. No dramatic turns. Just short pauses and long days. Sometimes it was a hello in the hallway. Sometimes a short conversation by the door. Once she handed me a sandwich wrapped in paper and said I looked like I forgot to eat again. I didn't ask why she noticed those things. I just accepted them. One evening, my shift ended early. I sat in my van for a while, staring at the steering wheel. Without really deciding, I walked back to the building. I told myself I was just stretching my legs. Her lights were on. I knocked. She opened the door almost immediately, like she had been awake anyway. She looked at me, surprised, then amused. "You're off duty," she said. "Yeah, I was nearby." She studied my face for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in. Just for tea." Inside, the apartment felt different in the evening. Softer. Warmer. Music played quietly from somewhere in the back. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic. We sat at the small kitchen table. She poured tea and asked about my work. Not in a polite way, but like she actually wanted to know. I told her about the routes, the deadlines, the pressure. About how every day feels the same, but somehow always exhausting. I didn't complain. I just explained. She listened without interrupting. When I asked about her, she told me about dancing again. Not the glamorous parts, but the routine, the injuries, the moments alone after the applause faded. She said aging in that world felt like becoming invisible. She said it calmly, without bitterness. Time passed without us noticing. At some point, I realized how relaxed I felt sitting there. No need to impress. No need to pretend. Just being present. When I stood up to leave, she didn't rush me. She walked me to the door and said, "See you around," like it was already a fact. From then on, I found small reasons to pass by that street. Not every day. I wasn't that obvious. But often enough that it felt natural. Sometimes she invited me in. Sometimes we just talked for a few minutes and went our separate ways. There were no promises. No clear direction. But slowly, something shifted. I started thinking about her during deliveries. Wondering how her day was going. Noticing details about other people that reminded me of her voice, her posture, the way she paused before speaking. Friends noticed I was distracted. One of them joked that I looked like someone who had a secret. I didn't correct him. One night, after another long conversation in her kitchen, she looked at me and said, "You know, you make things feel lighter around here." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. On the way home, I realized I was smiling. For no reason. Just because. It felt like the beginning of something real. Not exciting in a movie way, but steady. Human. I didn't yet question why it was so easy. I didn't ask myself if this had happened before with someone else. I was too busy believing that I was different. What we had didn't begin with a decision. It grew quietly, the way habits do. One evening after work turned into another, then into many. My visits stopped feeling accidental. They became expected, even if we never said it out loud. I started finishing my routes faster, just to have time left. I told myself it was practical. Less traffic. Better planning. But I knew the truth. I liked ending my days there. May never asked for anything directly. She didn't call me, didn't text me first. She simply made space. And somehow I filled it. Some nights she cooked. Simple meals. Pasta, soup, food that felt familiar. Other nights we just sat with tea, talking about nothing important. News stories, old music, things we remembered from childhood. She told me more about her dancing years. The discipline, the pressure to stay young, the feeling of being admired for a body before being valued as a person. She said it without anger, but there was a tired honesty in her voice. I told her things I hadn't told many people. About how I never stayed in one place long. About relationships that ended before they really began. About feeling replaceable at work, like another uniform that could be swapped out any day. She listened. Always the same way. Focused. Calm. Like time slowed when she paid attention. At some point, without planning it, we crossed a line. It wasn't dramatic. No big moment. One evening, while clearing dishes, our hands touched. Neither of us pulled away. That was it. After that, everything stayed mostly the same, but felt different. I started sleeping there sometimes. At first rarely, then more often. I kept a spare shirt in my backpack without admitting why. She gave me a drawer and said nothing else. Mornings were quiet. Coffee. Soft light through the curtains. She moved slowly, gracefully, even doing ordinary things. I watched her without trying to hide it. She noticed and smiled. "You look peaceful," she said once. I was. Friends began to ask questions. They noticed I was less available, more distracted. One of them pointed out the age difference, joking at first, then more seriously. I brushed it off. I said age didn't matter, that it was about connection. I believed it. With May, things felt balanced. She wasn't demanding. She didn't try to change me. She didn't talk about the future in heavy terms. That made it easier to imagine one. Sometimes she talked about loneliness, not as something dramatic, but as a background noise she had learned to live with. She said youth brought energy into her life. Movement. Lightness. I thought she meant me. One night, lying beside her, she traced a line on my arm and said she felt alive again. That she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Those words stayed with me. I carried them through my shifts. Through traffic. Through tired afternoons. I started thinking about saving money. About maybe changing jobs someday. About stability. I didn't share those thoughts with her yet. I didn't want to rush things. Everything felt fragile in a good way. Like something worth protecting. But there were moments that didn't quite fit. She rarely asked about my future. Never asked about my plans beyond the next few days. When I mentioned long-term things, she smiled but didn't follow the conversation. Sometimes, when her phone buzzed, she turned the screen down quickly. Not secretive, just automatic. I noticed, but I didn't push. One evening, I asked her if she had ever been married. She said no. Long relationships, yes. Nothing that lasted forever. I asked why. She thought for a moment and said she didn't like promises that couldn't be kept. I told myself that was honesty, not a warning. There were good days. Really good days. We went for walks. She showed me old studios where she used to practice. I met one of her friends, who looked at me with curiosity but said nothing. I felt proud standing next to her. Chosen. When people looked at us, I felt seen. Not judged, just noticed. At night, when I fell asleep beside her, I believed I had found something rare. Something that didn't need explanation. I didn't know yet that what felt real to me felt familiar to her. I didn't know that this wasn't the first time she had felt this calm. Or that calm, for her, never lasted. The first thing that changed was the rhythm. Not suddenly. Not in a way that could be pointed at and named. Just small delays that felt harmless at first. Messages answered later than usual. Plans moved to another day. A quiet distance that slipped in without announcing itself. I told myself it was normal. People get busy. Lives overlap and pull in different directions. I didn't want to be the kind of person who questioned every pause. But I noticed. I noticed that she stopped asking what time my shift ended. I noticed that evenings together became shorter and mornings less frequent. When I stayed over, she woke up earlier than before and moved through the apartment with a restless energy I hadn't seen in her. One night, I asked if everything was okay. She smiled and said she was just tired. I accepted that answer because I wanted to. The second thing that changed was the silence. The comfortable silence we used to share began to feel different. Heavier. Like something unsaid sitting between us. When I talked about my day, she listened, but her attention drifted. Her eyes moved to the window, to her phone, to places that weren't me. I tried to fill the space. I talked more. I planned small things. A walk. A meal. A movie she used to like. She agreed, but without enthusiasm. One afternoon, my route took me back to her street unexpectedly. A last-minute assignment. I parked farther away than usual and walked toward the building. I told myself I wouldn't stop by, that I would just finish the job and leave. As I turned the corner, I saw the building entrance, and I saw someone else coming out. He was wearing the same uniform I wore. Different company logo. Same backpack. Same tired posture. He was younger than me. Not by much, but enough that it was obvious. He laughed at something someone said behind the door. Then May stepped into view. She stood close to him. Too close to be casual. Her hand rested on the door frame the way it always did when she felt relaxed. Familiar. She said something to him I couldn't hear. He smiled back. The door closed behind them. I stood there longer than I should have. Long enough for the moment to burn itself into my memory. There was no shock in her body language. No hesitation. Just ease. I finished my delivery in a blur. I didn't remember the client's name. Or the number on the door. I only remembered the way my chest felt tight, like I was holding my breath without realizing it. That evening, she didn't message me. The next day, she did. Can we talk tonight? She wrote. I answered yes immediately. When I arrived, her apartment looked the same. The same soft lighting. The same familiar smell. But the air felt different. Thinner. Like something had already ended before words were spoken. She didn't offer tea. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. She folded her hands together and looked at them for a moment before speaking. I didn't plan this, she said. I never do. I waited. She told me about the courier. Younger. New to the area. Funny. Easy. She said it the way someone talks about the weather changing. Neutral. Observational. I asked if she had been seeing him behind my back. She shook her head. It just happens, she said. I don't look for it. It finds me. I asked why she didn't tell me sooner. She looked at me then. Really looked. Because I didn't think it meant anything yet. The words landed slowly. I told her it meant something to me. That what we had felt real. That I was already imagining a future, even if I hadn't said it out loud. She listened. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she sighed quietly. John, she said, I care about you. But I don't build my life around one person. I never have. I asked if I had done something wrong. She shook her head again. You were exactly who you were supposed to be, she said. That sentence hurt more than anger would have. I realized then that she wasn't confused. She wasn't torn. She wasn't choosing between options. She was simply moving forward the only way she knew how. I asked if this had happened before. She didn't answer right away. Then she nodded. More than once. I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavy, like they belonged to someone else. I told her I needed time to think. She didn't stop me. At the door, she said she hoped I understood. That she never promised me anything she couldn't give. I walked out without looking back. The days that followed were quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar. Not empty. Just stripped down. I went to work. I finished my routes. I came home. Friends noticed the change. They asked questions. I didn't give detailed answers. I didn't know how to explain something that felt so clear in hindsight and so confusing in the moment. One evening, as I passed her building again, I saw the same courier outside. He leaned against the wall, checking his phone. He looked relaxed. Comfortable. I didn't stop. That was when I finally understood. What felt like a beginning to me was part of a pattern to her. A cycle she stepped into whenever life grew too quiet. Youth passed through her space like light through a window. Brief. Warming. Temporary. I wasn't special because I was different. I was special because I fit. And when someone else fit better, she didn't hesitate to adjust. I didn't see May for weeks after that night. Not in person. Not by accident. I avoided her street even when it meant longer routes and more traffic. I told myself it was practical. In truth, I wasn't ready to see her door again. Life narrowed back down to its basics. Wake up. Work. Deliver. Come home. Sleep. The quiet I had once shared with her now followed me everywhere, heavier than before. At first, I replayed everything in my head. Every conversation. Every look. Every moment that had felt important. I searched for the exact point where I should have known. Where I could have protected myself. There wasn't one. What hurt most wasn't losing her. It was losing the version of myself that believed I had finally been chosen for something that lasted. One evening, after a long shift, I sat in my van longer than usual. I watched people come and go, carrying groceries, arguing on the phone, living their small, ordinary lives. I realized how little any of them knew about what I had just been through, and how little it mattered. A few days later, May sent me a message. I didn't open it right away. When I finally did, it wasn't long. She said she hoped I was okay. She said she never wanted to hurt me. She said she understood if I didn't want to talk again. I didn't reply. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. I didn't need explanations anymore. I already had the truth. Weeks passed. The sharpness dulled. Not gone, but manageable. I started sleeping better. Eating regularly again. I stopped checking my phone expecting nothing. One afternoon, a delivery took me close to her building without warning. I noticed it too late to turn around. I parked, took the package, and walked inside. Third floor. The hallway looked exactly the same. Same light. Same silence. I stood there for a moment, feeling my heartbeat slow instead of speed up. That surprised me. I knocked on the correct door. The client opened. I handed over the package, got the signature, turned around. Her door was closed. I felt relief. As I walked down the stairs, I realized something important. I wasn't hoping to see her anymore. I wasn't afraid of it either. The moment had passed. A month later, I heard through someone else that she was seeing another courier. Younger than the last one. New to the area. Same story, different face. I didn't feel angry when I heard it. I felt calm. Because it finally made sense. I wasn't wrong for believing in what we had. What I felt was real. The care. The connection. The hope. Those things don't become false just because they end. But what we had wasn't the same thing to both of us. To me, it was a beginning. To her, it was a pause. She didn't lie. She didn't manipulate. She simply lived by a pattern she had accepted long before I arrived. Youth brought movement into her life. Attention. Warmth. When it faded, she let it go. I was part of that rhythm, not an exception to it. One evening, months later, I delivered a package to a different building. Different street. Different door. A woman opened, looked at my uniform, and smiled in a way that felt familiar. She made a comment. Light. Casual. About my age. I smiled politely, handed over the package, and wished her a good evening. I walked away without looking back. That was the moment I knew the story was finished. I didn't need closure from May. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need answers. I had learned something quieter and more important. Love isn't proven by how intense it feels in the moment. It's proven by what remains when novelty fades. I kept my job. I kept my routines. I kept moving. And this time, when a door closed, I didn't mistake it for an invitation. Before we end, I want to say a few words personally. This story is a reminder that not every strong feeling means the same thing for both people, and sometimes what feels like love to one is just a habit to another. What do you think about this story? Do you believe John was truly in love, or was he only seeing what he wanted to see? And do you think May was honest from the beginning, or should she have stopped it earlier? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. If you enjoy real-life stories like this, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and support Life Diary by staying with us.